Welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for staying with us. You're watching Plain Speak with me, Shivani Gupta. The political storm in India over the Indian government's stance on the ongoing Israel-Hamas war refuses to die down. On Friday, India abstained from the initial voting on the UNGA resolution that called for an immediate humanitarian truce in the conflict. The resolution was eventually passed, but 14 countries opposed it while 45 others abstained from voting. This resolution, which was drafted by Jordan, did not make any mention of the terrorist group Hamas. India's move was heavily criticized by the opposition leaders at home. Former Congress President Sonia Gandhi even penned an editorial condemning government's abstention. Other opposition leaders have also echoed the same stance and called India's decision sad and shameful. The government defended its abstention and stated that the world should not buy into any justification of terror acts. It's important for India to not deter on terror. As a victim of terror itself, especially cross-border terrorism, on pretexts like Kashmir Azadi or autonomy, we know more than anybody else that victimhood should not be allowed as a justification of terror acts, and that only cowards use terror against innocents and civilians as a means of emancipation. You would think there would be all-party consensus on this, but for some reason, despite the fact that India also stressed on the need to address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, there's a lot of condemnation of the Indian government stance. Now, is this essentially needless politics, drawing distinctions without any difference, and stoking emotions over a sensitive issue? We take that question to our guests in just a bit, but first, let's take a deeper look at what happened at the UN. Now, the UNGA passed a resolution for this humanitarian truce in Israel-Hamas conflict. 120 nations voted in favor of this. As I mentioned, 14 against and 45 abstained. Countries like India also abstained from any voting over this resolution. This resolution was drafted by Jordan, did not mention Hamas, and that was one of the reasons that many countries came together to either oppose or abstain, because it was not an unequivocal condemnation of the terror unleashed on Israel in this case. Now later, Canada proposed to insert a paragraph, basically amend this resolution condemning the terror attack by Hamas. India, in fact, voted in favor of this amendment that was brought in by Canada. The amendment was backed by 87 countries later, but it did lack the two-thirds majority needed, and hence it was not adopted. Now, soon after the session, India stated the reasons why it decided to abstain from the voting. Government source informed CNN News18 that this move was guided by India's steadfast and consistent position as far as this conflict is concerned and as far as terror is concerned. The Indian government source mentioned there can be no equivocation of terror. There cannot be, of course, any ifs and buts put in. Terror attacks on October 7 were shocking and deserved condemnation, which that resolution failed to address. That resolution did not include any explicit condemnation of the attacks or Hamas. India calls for immediate and unconditional release of the hostages held by Hamas. Remember, it's a curious case. While everybody keeps talking about the humanitarian angle, as far as this conflict is concerned, very few people, certainly not those that are fighting for this humanitarian pause, are talking much about the hostages that are yet to be released by Hamas. Now, India also mentioned that India has always supported a two-state solution to this issue. That is India's long-standing commitment. The government stressed that this is India's consistent stand on the Palestine issue, and there's no dithering from that, but there is no need to also include Palestine cause when India first made the statement on Israel, for example, and there is no need to completely remove the mention of Hamas when you're actually talking about a humanitarian pause today. India was not the only country to oppose this resolution. Let me also take you through what some of the other countries said. And of course, these are traditional friends and partners of Israel. So USA has been steadfast in its support to Israel. It said that the omission of evil in this UNGA resolution was too stark to ignore. Australia pointed out that Hamas was not named in this UNGA resolution. UK backed Israel and said that they have an inherent right to self-defense. Fundamentally, the escalation came from Hamas and the retaliation then came from Israel. Germany said that there was no prominent sanction against Hamas. Everybody is tiptoeing around the whole issue of Hamas itself. Canada stated that UNGA resolution did not condemn Hamas, so they were not happy. Italy also stated that security for Israel was non-negotiable. So while there were only 14 such countries that completely vetoed this and 45 others that abstained, there is still substantial support as far as the Israeli cause is concerned, or the cause of peace, but a just peace between both sides, with the requirement or the need that that peace cannot be achieved unless Hamas is destroyed, distinct from Palestine and Palestinian cause. Let's come to back home. Congress leader Sonia Gandhi opposed the move by the Indian government. In an editorial piece, she went on to outline the Congress's line of thought, and she also took on the government as far as their move to abstain is concerned. So first up, she mentioned that Congress strongly opposes India's abstention from the UNGA resolution. She went on to talk about the previous statements made by Narendra Modi, mentioning that PM Modi made no mention of the Palestinian rights in initial statement. Now remember, that initial statement that she is referring to is the one that came immediately after the October 7 attacks. Is there a need to mention Palestinian humanitarian cause there or Palestinian overall rights issue there? That's a question that is up. She went on to say that India's historic position, which is a two-state just peace between the two countries, came only after Israel began its assault. Now that's when the Prime Minister not only talked about the humanitarian issue, but India has also sent aid as far as Palestine is concerned. She went on to say, we shouldn't erase from our memories the painful history of Palestinians. She's talked about Gaza being an open-air prison, fundamentally backing the claim that Israel has been the offender or the aggressor over many years and decades in this case. She went on to put the burden and the onus on Israel, saying that Israel is now focused on exacting revenge from the helpless and blameless population, and that's not the right thing to do. She also reiterated that even the Congress party stands for both Palestine and Israel to have the right to live in a just peace, and this is by far India's standing position as well. This is something, as she acknowledged, reiterated by the MEA, but the grouse is that the PM did not mention Palestine first in the aftermath, the immediate aftermath of the October 7 attack. The question we're asking today is this: there's hardly any difference in the positions that most parties in India are outlining. The long historical position of India has also been very clear. So is there needless politics going on India's stand, hair splitting going on in an attempt possibly to stoke emotions? We'll take that forward with our guests.
Terrorism is a malignancy and knows no borders, nationality or race. The world should not buy into any justification of terror acts. Let us keep aside differences, unite and adopt a zero-tolerance approach to terrorism.
Strongly expresses shock at the government of India abstaining on the UN General Assembly resolution.
Hello, Moto.
Is there needless politics going on then on India's stand? Is there really any distinction or difference or any departure from what India has always stood for? Let's go across to Neeti Jain, spokesperson of the BJP, joining us. Sushant Sareen, senior fellow ORF. Saira Shah Halim is author and activist, former candidate of the CPIM, and Kapil Madan is political analyst, leans towards the Congress party. Saira, let me begin with you. India has always stood for the two-state solution. They have always asked for peace in the region. They have backed for both communities and countries' rights. They have also aided in a humanitarian manner, the issues that the Palestinians are facing. What is the problem with the government stance?
See, Shivani, is very clear that there is an aggressor and there's an aggrieved. Now, everyone univocally condemns the attacks on Israel. What Hamas did was a complete terrorist attack. Everybody knows that. But you look at the human cost of the conflict. According to the official reports that are being coming out of Palestine, more than 7,000 people have died, and half of them happen to be children. Now, you can't be running with the hares and hunting with the hounds, because it is very clear that it is a totalitarian government here at the center in India, which is
I'm sorry?
tacitly supporting. There is a totalitarian regime in India right now, which is absolutely not taking any clear stance on
But I
the
don't
innocents
understand,
that have died.
Saira, if you're going to, in a country like India, if you're going to go across and go out and keep saying that there's a totalitarian government in India, I don't know how seriously people are going to take this. I mean, some of this hyperbole has to come down.
See, Shivani, can we ignore that out of the nearly 7,000 deaths in the post-Hamas attack, half of the casualties happen to be children? The hospitals are being bombed, the schools have been bombed, and here the people of Israel are not with Netanyahu. What are we going to
No,
talk
no, I'm
about
not
India's
asking you
position?
that question. I'm not interested in the politics in
there have
Israel.
been global
Saira,
protests, there have been
Saira,
protests
first of all, I should
against
mention
Israel.
that any numbers that are coming out of Palestine need to be taken with a pinch of salt. Fundamentally,
Pinch
they're
of
being
salt?
governed by
Aren't you
Hamas,
seeing-
which is the
aren't you
terror
seeing the video
organization,
footage?
and numbers that are coming out of
Shivani,
Palestine
is
cannot be
everyone
believed
blind
at
to
face
the
value
video
without
footages
authentication.
that are coming
Let's not
out
forget
of
that that whole story about the hospital being bombed turned out to be utter lies. Right? But that's not the question I asked you. The question I asked you is, India has always stood with the Palestinian cause. That's our historical position. India has reiterated
Exactly.
that position. What is the problem with what the government has done today? Is it supposed to not condemn the terror from Hamas?
No. Again, I'm iterating, Shivani, that Palestine is not Hamas and Hamas is not Palestine. Let us be very clear.
Okay.
If the target is the terrorist, is the terrorism that happened, okay, everyone in the right mind has condemned the terrorist attack.
Not everyone.
Because innocents have died.
No, not
Innocents
everyone.
have died.
Let's come to
No,
terms
but
with the
then-
reality that we are
Okay,
living in
Shivani,
an
if you can,
age
if
where
you-
not
if you let me
everyone,
complete.
even responsible individuals, organizations have not condemned the Hamas terror attack. Not everyone.
See, I'll be very clear. I'm iterating, and
Yeah.
Shivani, if you'll allow me a minute, we know that India's history with Palestine, they've always stood by the Palestine cause. However, we need to understand that this counter-aggression that is happening on innocents after the Hamas attack needs to be condemned, and it is time that India takes a clear stand on what is happening, because what is happening right now is death of children and innocents, and it's time that we all need to take a very
Okay.
clear stand.
Fair
We
enough. So
need
your
to- we
contention
need
continues
pass
to
a
be.
resolution.
I get that. You're saying your contention is that despite everything that India has said, despite everything that India has done for humanitarian aid, even for Palestine and Gaza, it is not enough, and in the current Indian government needs to take a more unequivocal stand on the
Absolutely,
human
absolutely.
tragedy and the calamity that has befallen
Yes.
Gaza. I get your
Yes.
point. Let
Yes.
Niti Jain respond to that. Niti Jain, it's been a little bit of a dilly-dallying, confused approach is what the political opponents in India are saying. You've not stood steadfast with the Palestinian cause, and in the aftermath of the October 7 attacks, with the kind of counter-offensive that Israel is mounting, India should also put its weight to maybe ask for a ceasefire, as many are doing, and ask for a little bit of de-escalation in this matter.
So Shivani, first of all, I think this new fashion of responding to facts with emotions is completely beyond my understanding of things. The fact being that India has stood for and still stands for the double state of Palestine and Israel. We are sending the aids. The only thing that we are opposing today, and we have a more toughened stand against, is terrorism. So let the opposition explain, do they stand for terrorism or against terrorism? Everything that Sonia ji has written in her op-ed, I think all it does is kind of explains why India was open from 2004 to 14 to an entire terrorism, it was open to terrorists forever. I think that is all that op-ed explains. Whatever is happening in Israel, sorry?
Why? Why do you say that?
Because all she has done is called out Israel on defending themselves against the terrorists. You can say the Hamas is not Palestine and all of those things, but the Israeli army has given them sufficient warning. Let the civilians move out. The civilians are not being allowed to move out by Hamas. They're using them as shields. So how is it that Israel does not have the right to defend themselves against such terrorist attacks? And the
Well, if you
people who
look
are
at-
calling
if you
about
read the-
humanitarian here, just give me 5 seconds. The people who are talking about the humanitarian rights of the civilians there, they're not talking about the hostages that are being taken by
No,
the
it's a
Hamas
curious
there.
case. I mentioned at the start of this show, it's a very curious case
So I
and
think
pattern
the
emerging
bottom line
that
is, are you
exactly the
for
people who are
terrorism or
harping on
against?
the humanitarian issue in Palestine and Gaza are forgetting about the hostages at all. In fact, they're not asking for those hostages to be released by Hamas. Unequivocally.
So, which is what I'm saying. The bottom line remains, are you standing with terrorism or for terrorism? This is not about India not supporting Palestine anymore. We do. We stand on our historic stand. We are sending aid to Palestine and all of those things. But you cannot blame Israel for standing for their own self-defense, and that is all that India did in UN. They said mention the Hamas attack, which is also what Canada had asked for
Proposed,
that
yes.
amendment. But that was not mentioned there. So if India is taking a stand against terrorism in our own country, we cannot say हमारे साथ हो तो गलत है, किसी और के साथ हो तो कोई बात नहीं.
Right.
That is
No, I'll come to that point.
Shivani,
I'll come to
Shivani.
that point. I'll come to that point. Why, from an Indian perspective, this is possibly the right moral and ethical stance to take. But give me a second, Saira. I'll give you 30 seconds to respond. You had your hand up.
Yeah, so I'm saying, is it justified that one targets the entire Palestinian population for the attack carried out by Hamas on October 7th? Because this is a humanitarian crisis.
How is it
and I think
justified
it's
that
time
Hamas
that
attack
India
was not
takes a
mentioned in
tough
UN?
position on the counter-aggression that is being deployed. And here again, I'm iterating that half of the population, half of the casualties happen to be children. We cannot deny the video
Madam, how
footage.
is this
and
justified
be
that the
la-la-land,
Hamas
because
attack on Israel was not
we need
mentioned
to
in that
understand
agenda?
the aggressors.
That is all we raised
Because
an objection
here-
to.
No, one
No,
second.
please don't bring to that emotional level of things. I am agreeing with you. Nobody is standing for any kind of violence. But the only point at the fact being that if you are not going to condemn Hamas, you will
One by
blame
one.
Israel for defending
Palestine does
themselves.
not. Palestine does
We
not
are
have the
against
arsenal,
terrorism in our
does not
country
have
and
the
anywhere that it
arsenal
happens, and
One
that
second.
is a stand that
in
India
the
has
country.
taken.
If a
And it will
terrorist
continue to take.
organization has
Okay, okay,
attacked the country,
Saira, I think I got your point. You're saying
Constitute
fundamentally.
Palestine.
One
And I
second,
think
one
it's
second,
very
ladies.
clear.
One second. Please don't speak over each other. Then neither of you is going to be audible. But Saira, I got your point that Hamas has to be distinguished from the Palestinian population, and I don't think anybody disagrees with you on that. But what is also a reality, the hard-code reality on the ground, is that the Hamas uses Palestinian citizens and civilians as shields. It has been a proven fact, reported over several years and decades, that most of their machinery functions out of
Shivani,
civic. One second, most of their
7,000
machinery
people
functions
have
out of
died in the
civic places.
counter-aggression.
They've got
Half of
tunnels,
that happened to
hordes
the
of
children.
tunnels beneath hospitals. We cannot ignore that fact. It's a terrorist organization that uses Palestinian civilians as shields. But that cannot be your ticket to continue to do what you want to do. But anyways, I don't want to get into the historical aspect of it. Let's focus on Indian stance. Sushant Sareen, the point is, India is a country that has been a victim of cross-border terrorism. We've had all kinds of theories cooked up by our border, by our neighbor country on why we are so bad and why there can be a just Islamic jihad cause against India. We've suffered for it for 70 plus years. Now, if tomorrow there was an escalation from Pakistani terrorists, the so-called non-state actors, which Hamas in this case is not even non-state, it is the state of Palestine. But let's say non-state actors based in Pakistan were to act against India, escalate, kill.
Hamas is not Palestine.
I'm sorry, madam, get your facts right. Hamas is elected government in Palestine.
I am sorry. We need to get down into history and understand Hamas does
Today's
not
history is
represent the
Hamas is
official
elected
position
government
of
in
Hamas.
Palestine. That's
we
the
need
history.
to understand who set up the Hamas.
I'm not interested in that. Hamas is going to defend itself. I'm not here to defend Hamas or intellectualize what happened as far as Hamas, setting up is concerned. That's not my job. That is precisely the problem here. No context to terror organizations. But let me continue my line of thought with Sushant Sareen. Let's say tomorrow a non-state actor backed by Pakistan was to escalate the situation with India. 1,400 casualties for Israelis, a small country. I think it's going to be thousands of Indians murdered for that kind of an escalation. Are we to then say that Indians will retaliate, and just because India would be the stronger military power here, be able to, exact greater casualties on the Pakistani side, as our wars have seen in the past, just because of that, then India becomes bad? If India was to support a resolution like this, that we are condemning ourselves.
That's true, Shivani. And 1,400 casualties in Israel killed in a terrorist attack, which has not been sufficiently condemned by people on the left and on the Islamist side in India. And there's very little to choose between the two. They're both bad for each other. The fact of the matter is the equivalent number in India would be 200,000 people. And I'm sure these people would say that let's have a ceasefire and let's talk this out. So what if 200,000 people have been killed? And then I've heard that India is apparently a totalitarian state. And if India indeed was a totalitarian state right now, I don't think this lady on your show...
Saira, please, let's not do this. Sushant.
She's kept quiet. She's had her say. Now she should keep quiet and listen. She wouldn't be on your show, Shivani, number one. I don't think Mrs. Gandhi would have been, her article would either have been written or been published in an Indian newspaper, a mainstream Indian newspaper, if this was actually a totalitarian state. Let's also not forget that we've had attacks, for example, Kargil, which the Pakistanis claimed was by non-state actors. We knew better. But what do you do when, whether it's the non-state actor or it is the state itself? And you are absolutely right. Hamas is the ruling dispensation in Gaza. It is running the state in Gaza. It is not running the state on the West Bank side, but it is certainly running the state on the Gaza. So now what is Israel's, and this whole, there's these familiar tropes, genocide, indiscriminate bombing. There is no indiscriminate bombing. The casualty figures are highly, highly, highly exaggerated, because if indeed there were those casualties taking place, then Pallywood, as this media arm of Hamas is called, Pallywood would also be giving you, footages of funerals taking place. We haven't seen funerals taking place, have we? We've only seen lined up dead bodies, and many of them people actually itching themselves or trying to talk on their phone or trying to silence their phone. We've seen footages of that as well. So we know what kind of dramatics have been going on. We've seen the same people do the same thing over and over again. So we've seen a lot of that nonsense also taking place. So the casualty figures are highly exaggerated. This whole thing about indiscriminate bombing, if it indeed was indiscriminate bombing, I think Gaza would have been flattened by now. It hasn't been indiscriminate bombing. And the fact also is, Shivani, that this is an accepted norm of a war. And what is happening right now
is a war.
In Gaza, war has been declared, an officially declared war. Now, what happens in war is that it is not going to be life as usual. You are targeting buildings, some of them residential, yes, but after giving adequate warning so that those are evacuated. But you're also telling people from that area to move out of that area so that they don't come into the firing range. Now, there are other examples. So, for example, let's talk about the Pakistanis who are, really feeling all outraged, like Saira Shah Halim is also out here. What did the Pakistanis do when they were carrying out operations in their tribal areas? They literally emptied out every single tribal district, whether it was in Swat, which is not exactly a tribal district, or any of the other 5 or 7 of the tribal districts were literally depopulated. And then the army steamrollered in. This is an accepted way of fighting a warlike situation, and in this case, actually a war. Now, what are these people against? Now, when a resolution comes in the United Nations, I think this is the first time that the government of India has shown the kind of clarity which needs to be there in this cause. We have very clearly distinguished between a terrorist attack we've condemned unequivocally, and we have not linked it with the Israeli operations, We have also asked for peace. We have not asked for a ceasefire because a ceasefire at this stage works in favor of the terrorists
Yes.
who are actually the state. Now, this is like saying that when the Pakistanis attacked us in Kargil, there should have been an immediate ceasefire, something that the Pakistanis were plugging for.
No.
You remember when Sartaj Aziz came to India? He wanted a ceasefire. You remember what the rest of the West was telling us? Please do a ceasefire, which would have meant that those guys who had infiltrated into India and occupied Indian territory would have continued to stay out there. How can any country accept a ceasefire in this kind of a situation?
No, the
So if-
ceasefire, even those, I don't understand why people have such, moral lack of clarity. Forget moral lack of clarity, just strategic lack of clarity. If you ask for a ceasefire, you allow Hamas, which some on the left and liberal are willing to condemn as a terrorist organization, you allow Hamas to escape. Now, you yourself accept, some of them accept that with Hamas there can be no peace. It is a terror group, as Syria is doing. Then how do you allow Hamas to survive? Israel's stated motive is that it's going to eradicate Hamas. It is for everyone's benefit.
Shivani, the unfortunate
Palestine's
aspect
benefit.
of this, Shivani, the unfortunate aspect of this entire crisis is that people on the left and the so-called liberal who are more fascist than anybody else because they're the most intolerant people you can ever come across. They shut out voices of other people they don't like. These are the people who have actually linked Hamas with the Palestinian cause.
Yes.
They are talking about Palestine but actually defending Hamas. They do not distinguish between the two. If they did distinguish between the two, they would have had absolutely no objection to Hamas being named and shamed and being called out and being proscribed internationally. But they're not ready to do that. And what is the sloganeering? Most of these guys and their ilk in Western universities, which are also dens of this third-rate leftism, what do these guys do out there? What is the kind of slogan? They are openly calling for genocide. Are they not? So, it's rich coming from communists who speak about human rights.
No, there is obviously, we've seen
from communists,
no, we've
right?
seen that the whole chatter about human rights can be very convenient, and I'm not blaming only one side for this. Human rights are a very convenient argument for virtually all sides. And in this case, human rights have been used as a fig leaf to basically ensure that nothing that happens from Gaza is ever retaliated upon just because, oh my God, so many people are going to die. So many people did die in Israel. You cannot ask a country of that size that has lost 1,400 people in one go to not retaliate. Whether you like it or you don't, that's not how the world works. But Kapil, I thank you for your patience. Let me come to you on what Sonia Gandhi has written. I find it odd. She goes on to say that we stand for a two-state solution in Israel, and this is also the position re-enumerated by the MEA. But she says that the fact that the PM initially did not mention the Palestine cause is wrong, and the historical stand was only clarified once the Israel counter-offensive began. Now, I don't understand, on October 7 or October 8, as the world is coming to grips with the sheer barbaric, brutal attack that these Hamas terrorists have inflicted on innocent Israeli civilians, many of them women and children, what are you supposed to say about the Palestine cause? Why should you have to say anything? You will just condemn unequivocally the Hamas attack. Why are you holding the Prime Minister responsible for just doing that?
Now, let me give you a bit of history, Shivani. If you will look at the 2003 Oslo Peace Accord, it was during Mr. Vajpayee's government that India sent a representative in Palestine. In 2003, we passed a resolution during Mr. Vajpayee's government that voted against the construction of a wall that was to be constructed on the West Bank. So this has been the stand of the government during the Mr. Vajpayee's government. Now, allow me to now answer this. There have been some irrational arguments made on the panel. One of the panelists said, we've been given warnings to, or Israel is given warning to the civilians. Why are they not moving? I mean, I find it, extremely irrational argument to make. You are in a war-like situation. where your collateral damage is more than your main damage. Now, possibly there cannot be any argument, any defense in support of anyone who has committed that brutal attack on 7th of October. But does that mean your collateral damage in response to that attack would be more than the target? I mean, this sounds very, very illogical to me. Now,
How do you quantify loss of life?
Madam, allow
This
me to,
is an
madam, allow me
attack
to make,
on a sovereign country, and they have the right to
Madam, did I
defend.
interrupt it?
Okay,
Madam,
one second.
okay,
Kapil, I think you've been very patient. I
Did
think you've been very
interrupt you?
patient as far
Yes.
as waiting for your turn is
Yes.
concerned. But can I just take that point
allow
that
me
you're
to make
making?
my point.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'll give you more
Yes.
time. But can I just make...
So, yes.
One second. Can I just come in for that point you made? That it's irrational to say that we are allowing citizens or civilians, we are giving them warnings to move away when the collateral damage in Gaza is even more than the intended damage. But whose fault is that?
So certainly not those civilians' fault.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly not those civilians' fault.
Yeah, but
Now,
whose fault?
Let me give you.
No, but is it Hamas's fault or not?
So Hamas, I mean, if a person who has done any kind of a wrong, will
why
you
are you
punish
talking in
everyone?
inanities and generalities?
No,
What
no,
if a person
no, I am
has done
not.
something
No.
wrong? Let's talk about Hamas. No.
Now-
Is Hamas
now what-
responsible for the
of course,
civilians
yes.
in Gaza
Yes,
Strip or not?
Yes. I am all I am trying to say is that whatever has happened on 7th of October, you can't punish, every civilian who may not have anything to do with, Hamas
I understand
or,
that.
whatever is happening.
That's a utopia that you want. That's not the world we live in. I think Sushant Sareen mentioned the fact that this is a state of war. Have we... One second. No, Kapil, I'm sorry. One second. Kapil, I'll give you more time. Don't worry about that. I'll give you more time. But this is an inane argument where you're saying, listen, there's a war going on, but let there be no casualties. I have not heard of a war like this ever fought. There will never be a war like this. This is a state of war. There will be casualties on both sides. Even till today, IDF soldiers are still dying. Now, the question should be asked of Hamas, why their Hamas casualties are less and the civilian casualties as touted by them are always higher and higher by several margins. Why is that the case? Why don't they protect their civilians?
Now, Shivani, just one point here. When a hospital was bombed, do you consider this as a war
Which
crime
hospital?
or not?
Which hospital was bombed?
There was a hospital.
Which
there was a
hospital?
hospital that was bombed. So
Name
I
the
don't know
hospital.
name,
Which one
but
are you
there
talking
reports.
about?
No, so are you disputing that there was no hospital?
No, there
that
are
was bombed?
multiple hospital
No.
stories that have come out. Which hospital are you talking about?
No. One hospital that was bombed, that, there are reports that suggest that there was a hospital that was bombed. So I don't know, I may not know the name, but there are reports. So are you disputing the report?
Yes, I'm disputing
Are
it.
you disputing the report?
Yes, I'm
So you were saying
disputing
that
it.
There was no hospital.
That hospital story being bombed, I don't know what rock you've been living under, Kapil. That hospital story being bombed has been discredited. Even by the most leftist organizations across the world, they have had to accept that hospital was not bombed.
So I am sorry, Shivani.
There was a blast that took over there because of a misfired rocket by Islamic Jihad. That is of a group of Palestine.
Shivani, did you go there and investigate?
Did you go there?
That there were.
Did you go there?
There are reports. Did I said who bombed?
But did you go there?
No, but did I say who?
But why did you ask me that question? No, but did you go?
I am asking because you disputed.
No, but did you go there? Why would you throw that? I'm sorry, Kapil. Don't be clever by half. Why would you throw that in my face? Did you go there? If you didn't go there, I will listen to you if you were there.
Because you disputed.
I'm disputing it because all international agencies have disputed it.
No, the hospital who has bombed is disputed. And it is not in dispute that a hospital was bombed.
No, it was the car park of the hospital. Nahi aur lo. It was not the hospital. It was the car park of the hospital. Everything about that story has been disputed. The fact that 500 people died, disputed.
So अभी आपने बोला कि हॉस्पिटल बॉम्ब नहीं हुआ, आपने मेरे से नाम पूछ लिया हॉस्पिटल का.
बताइए कौन से हॉस्पिटल की बात कर रहे हैं आप?
तो आप बोल रहे हैं कि अभी अच्छा आप बताइए कि कौन से कार पार्क में बॉम्ब हुआ, आप बताएं. You are a
No, but you brought this up. The onus is on you to establish the facts. Half-baked stories मत बोलिए ना यहाँ पे.
Half-baked story नहीं बोल रहा शिवानी, but your viewers are getting.
What are they getting? I am not getting. आप मुझे तो explain कर दे क्या बोलना चाह रहे हैं आप.
मैं ये बोलना चाह रहा हूँ इसी शो पे आपने पहले डिस्प्यूट किया कि हॉस्पिटल बॉम्ब नहीं
What is
हुआ।
your point?
मैंने तो बोला नहीं कि किसने बॉम्ब नहीं
Kapil,
किया।
what is your point? You're not an expert on Palestine. You're not an expert of the Gaza Strip. You've not been there.
Yeah.
Right? Get to the point.
So neither you are. We are all arguing on the basis
Get
of
to the
reports
point.
and information. That is the point I'm trying to make here is that your collateral damage cannot be more than your main damage. People who have nothing to do with the attack that happened on 7th, they are paying the price for it.
Of course they are
And
paying the
there are
price.
words.
Who has ever
Yes.
denied that?
So why would someone who has got small kids would pay the price on either side? On Israel also.
Why
in
would
this
they?
conflict.
That's war.
All opposition.
No, we can't justify
I've
this,
had-
Shivani.
One second, Saira, I'll come to you. I'll come to you.
Same argument people trying to make here is that there should be a just solution and there should be peace that prevails. I don't
Okay.
know why
Kapil,
do people have
Kapil,
why do
out of
people
all
have-
of that long intervention, the question I asked you, you didn't answer. My question
I am
at the very start of the show has been, India has batted for a two-state solution. India has always stood for the just rights of the Palestinians to have a state. So what is the problem here? We are discussing why people are criticizing Indian government stance. आपने उस पर तो कुछ बोला ही नहीं। मैंने आपसे सवाल पूछा था कि प्रधानमंत्री सुनिए अब आप सुनिए प्लीज। मैंने आपसे सवाल पूछा था कि सोनिया गांधी ने अपना एडिटोरियल पीस लिखा, उनमें उन्होंने कंप्लेन करी कि प्रधानमंत्री के पहले स्टेटमेंट में उन्होंने पैलेस्टीन का मेंशन नहीं किया। My question was, on October 7, October 8, when the Prime Minister first made his tweet, his first statement was in the immediate aftermath of the fact that the world was waking up to the most brutal, barbaric, worst attack on Jews since World War II. In that moment, is he supposed to talk about the so-called Palestine cause, or is he supposed to extend
Shivani,
his
can I come
sympathies
in?
to a
Shivani,
friend
can
like
I come
Israel?
in? Shivani,
But
can
that,
I come
I'm not
in,
getting
please?
an answer to
Shivani?
that. Sarah, 1 second. Yes, let me give him 30 seconds to
Shivani.
respond
Of
to
course,
that.
in a conflict, immediately after 7, the conflict started, and the Prime Minister has opinion on almost everything, and where the issues that requires his intervention, the issues which requires taking a stand, the Prime Minister is not to be seen anywhere.
Okay.
We've seen it in Manipur. How forget what has happened in Israel. The brutalities were committed in Manipur also. We've seen how BJP government has not taken responsibility.
Okay, fair
and
enough.
it took
Saira,
more than-
30 seconds, then
it took them more
Sushant.
than-
Okay, final comments, please, Saira.
Okay, now there was a lot of whataboutery about the reportage that's coming in. Can we deny that this is as of today, 30th, an Indonesian funded hospital has reported, like more than hundreds of deaths in a hospital? Can we deny that reportage and say that they are struggling to treat a deluge of patients?
I didn't deny that.
Thanks to the Israeli bombardment, can we deny that?
I didn't deny that. I only denied the particular story about a hospital
Shivani,
being
can we
bombed,
deny
quote
the
unquote.
complete blackout? Can we deny the complete blackout in Gaza?
Yes, I can deny that.
Internet was cut out.
Yes, I can
we
deny that.
The fuel was cut out. So
Madam, I can deny that.
Why are you contesting? Why are you contesting that more than 7,000?
I can deny the fact that there is no complete blackout in Gaza.
When we know that there's been a blackout, when we know that there's been an internet blackout, when we know
Yet we keep
that
seeing all of these
reporters are
footages
not
coming out.
they're not allowed to actually send out the correct reportage from that area. So here we need to rely on all information that is coming in.
Sorry, I can't rely on all kinds of information coming in. It's my job to verify and sift through the information. As far as that hospital being bombed is concerned, that information was wrong. Every news outlet worth its salt, regardless of its historical stand or its leanings, has had to accept there was no Israeli bombing of a hospital leading to 500 casualties. That is it. Yes, Sushant Sari.
There was
Sushant
a
Sari.
hospital that
Okay,
was
so
bombed.
Shivani,
Very quickly, I have limited time. Saira, limited time, please.
Okay,
Thank you.
so one, if there is a blackout, that is very much part of war. You take out the energy infrastructure of the other countries. Turkey does it. All sorts of other countries do it. I don't see people like Saira Shah Halim, get all apoplectic when that happens, when Turks do it or some of the other countries do it. Number one. Number two, just because some previous government had taken a certain position does not mean that every government for the next 1000 years in this country is stuck by that position. If we have changed our position and we've become clearer on the issue of terrorism, good for it. So just because Mr. Vajpayee did it or Nehru did it or somebody else did it, nobody gives a damn.
Okay.
This is a new situation. Number 3,
Mr.
Mr. Madan makes this proportionality.
One person only, please.
What would he have? Mr. Madan makes the proportionality argument. What would he have Israel do? Would he have Israel ask Hamas to give 1400 women, children, men, old people so that they can be massacred in the same way and Mr. Madan would be happy? And the last point, when he says that there has to be a peaceful solution, you cannot have, for example, a peaceful solution if you are going to talk to Lashkar-e-Taiba or Jaish-e-Mohammed. Similarly, you cannot have a peaceful solution if it is contingent on getting the approval of Hamas, which asks for the genocide of Jews.
Okay.
It is not possible to have a peaceful solution.
No,
So
it is
until and
also a
unless
contention,
you
and I
fight
think
for Hamas,
those
there
talking
is
about
no-
history should talk about the fact that there was peaceful solutions,
cannot
two-state
allow a
solutions
genocide
on the
happening
table.
anywhere in
Which
the
side
world?
is responsible for repeatedly refuting the two-state solution? That question should also be asked if you're looking at history. But I've run out of time. I'll give Niti Jain 30 seconds only. Niti Jain.
So I think the question that you were asking, Mr. Madan,
Yes.
Shivani,
He's
the
saying
point
the
is
Prime Minister has been quiet on issues where he should actually make his mind known.
the Prime Minister did not mention Palestine because he was referring to a terrorist attack. It was not required to mention our historic stand on the issue during that matter. It was a statement about the attack. I think what he should answer about is the CWC statement that came out of Congress, which did not mention Hamas after the Hamas attack.
Yeah.
And they were in support of that entire matter, which was a national embarrassment. And again, the bottom line being, this entire issue is either you stand with terrorism or against terrorism. Congress repeatedly has shown that they have been terror apologists in the past and they remain so. That is all that comes out of the op-ed that Sonia Gandhi ji has written.
Okay, all right. I'd leave it at that. I do thank all of our guests for joining us. Sushant Sareen continues with us. On the other side, we look at the other aspect of what has happened in the aftermath of the Israel-Gaza conflict. The growing anti-Semitism quite openly all across the world. Now a mob stormed into a Russian airport allegedly looking for Jews, targeting Jews. Is anti-Israel hate becoming openly anti-Jew hate? We'll take that on the other side.
Hello, Moto.